"Yes." "Can I see him?" "Come in," said the little maid. Evidently there was no difficulty about seeing Father Cassidy, no mysterious ceremonies such as Emily had half expected, even if she were allowed to see him at all. She was shown into a book-lined room and left there, while the maid went to call Father Cassidy, who she said was working in the garden. That sounded quite natural and encouraging. If Father Cassidy worked in a garden, he could not be so very terrible. Emily looked about her curiously. She was in a very pretty room, with cozy chairs and pictures and flowers. Nothing alarming or uncanny about it, except a large black cat, who was sitting on the top of one of the bookcases. It was really an enormous creature. Emily adored cats and had always felt at home with any of them, but she had never seen such a cat as this. What with its size and its insolent gold-hued eyes, set like living jewels in its black velvet face, it did not seem to belong to the same species as nice, cuddly, respectable kittens at all. Mr. Dare would never have had such a beast around his manse. All Emily's dread of Father Cassidy returned. And then in came Father Cassidy, with the friendliest smile in the world. Emily took him in with her level glance, as was her habit, or gift, and never again in the world was she the least bit afraid of Father Cassidy. He was big and broad-shouldered, with brown eyes and brown hair, and his very face was so deeply tanned from his inveterate habit of going about bareheaded in merciless sunshine that it was brown too. Emily thought he looked just like a big nut, a big, brown, wholesome nut. Father Cassidy looked at her as he shook hands. Emily had one of her visitations of beauty just then. Excitement had brought a wild rose hue to her face. The sunlight brought out the watered silk gloss of her black hair. Her eyes were softly dark and limpid. But it was at her ears Father Cassidy suddenly bent to look. Emily had a moment of agonized wonder if they were clean. "She's got pointed ears," said Father Cassidy in a thrilling whisper. "Pointed ears! I knew she came straight from fairyland the minute I saw her. Sit down, elf, if elves do sit. Sit down and give me the latest news of Titania's court." Emily's foot was now on her native heath. Father Cassidy talked her language, and he talked it in such a mellow, throaty voice, slurring his ofs ever so softly as became a proper Irishman. But she shook her head a little sadly. With the burden of her errand on her soul, she could not play the part of ambassadress from Elfland. "I'm only Emily Star of New Moon," she said, and then gasped hurriedly, because there must be no deception, no sailing under false colors. "And I'm a Protestant." "And a very nice little Protestant you are," said Father Cassidy. "But for sure I'm a bit disappointed. I'm used to Protestants, the woods hereabouts being full of 'em. But it's 100 years since the last elf called on me." Emily stared. Surely Father Cassidy wasn't 100 years old. He didn't look more than 50. Perhaps, though, Catholic priests did live longer than other people. She didn't know exactly what to say, so she said a bit lamely, "I see you have a cat." "Wrong." Father Cassidy shook his head and groaned dismally. "A cat has me." Emily gave up trying to understand Father Cassidy. He was nice, but ununderstandable. She let it go at that, and she must get on with her errand. "You are a kind of minister, aren't you?" she asked, timidly. She didn't know whether Father Cassidy would like being called a minister. "Kind of," he agreed amiably. "And you see, ministers and priests can't do their own swearing. They have to keep cats to do it for them. I never knew any cat that could swear as genteelly and effectively as the Bai." "Is that what you call him?" asked Emily, looking at the black cat in some awe. It seemed hardly safe to discuss him right before his face. "That's what he calls himself. My mother doesn't like him because he steals the cream. Now, I don't mind his doing that. No, it's his way of licking his jaws after it that I can't stand. Oh, Bai, we've a fairy calling on us. Be excited for once, I implore you. There's a duck of a cat." The Bai refused to be excited. He winked an insolent eye at Emily. "Have you any idea what goes on in the head of a cat, elf?" What queer questions Father Cassidy asked. Yet Emily thought she would like his questions if she were not so worried. Suddenly Father Cassidy leaned across the table and said, "Now just what's bothering you?" "I'm so unhappy," said Emily piteously. "So are lots of other people. Everybody is unhappy by spells. But creatures who have pointed ears shouldn't be unhappy. It's only mortals who should be that." "Oh, please, please." Emily wondered what she should call him. Would it offend him if a Protestant called him father? But she had to risk it. "Please, Father Cassidy, I'm in such trouble, and I've come to ask a great favor of you." Emily told him the whole tale from beginning to end, the old Murray-Sullivan feud, her erstwhile friendship with Lofty John, the big sweet apple, the unhappy consequence, and Lofty John's threatened revenge. The Bi and Father Cassidy listened with equal gravity until she had finished. Then the Bi winked at her, but Father Cassidy put his long brown fingers together. "Humph," he said. "That's the first time," reflected Emily, "that I've ever heard anyone outside a book say humph." "Humph," said Father Cassidy again. "And you want me to put a stop to this nefarious deed?" "If you can," said Emily. "Oh, it would be so splendid if you could. Will you? Will you?" Father Cassidy fitted his fingers still more carefully together. "I'm afraid I can hardly invoke the power of the keys to prevent Lofty John from disposing as he wishes of his own lawful property, you know, Elf." Emily didn't understand the allusion to the keys, but she did understand that Father Cassidy was declining to bring the lever of the church to bear on Lofty John. There was no hope then. She could not keep the tears of disappointment out of her eyes. "Oh, come now, darling, don't cry," implored Father Cassidy. "Elves never cry. They can't. It would break my heart to discover you weren't one of the green folk. You may call yourself of New Moon, and of any religion you like, but the fact remains that you belong to the Golden Age and the old gods. That's why I must save your precious bit of greenwood for you." Emily stared. "I think it can be done," Father Cassidy went on. "I think if I go to Lofty John and have a heart-to-heart talk with him, I can make him see reason. Lofty John and I are very good friends. He's a reasonable creature if you know how to take him, which means to flatter his vanity judiciously. I'll put it to him, not as priest to parishioner, but as man to man, that no decent Irishman carries on a feud with women, and that no sensible person is going to destroy for nothing but a grudge those fine old trees that have taken half a century to grow and can never be replaced. Why, the man who cuts down such a tree, except when it's really necessary, should be hanged as high as Haman on a gallows made from the wood of it." Emily thought she would write that last sentence of Father Cassidy's down in Cousin Jimmy's blank book when she got home. "But I won't say that to Lofty John," concluded Father Cassidy. "Yes, Emily of New Moon, I think we can consider it a settled thing that your bush will not be cut down." Suddenly Emily felt very happy. Somehow she had entire confidence in Father Cassidy. She was sure he would twist Lofty John around his little finger. "Oh, I can never thank you enough," she said earnestly. "That's true, so don't waste breath trying. And now tell me things. Are there any more of you? And how long have you been yourself?" "I'm 12 years old. I haven't any brothers or sisters, and I think I'd better be going home." "Not till you've had a bite of lunch." "Oh, thank you. I've had my supper." 2 hours ago, and a 2-mile walk since. Don't tell me. I'm sorry I haven't any nectar and ambrosia on hand, such food as elves eat, and not even a saucer of moonshine. But my mother makes the best plum cake of any woman on P.E. Island, and we keep a cream cow. Wait here a bit. Don't be afraid of the Bi. He eats tender little Protestants sometimes, but he never meddles with leprechauns." When Father Cassidy came back, his mother came with him, carrying a tray. Emily had expected to see her big and brown too, but she was the tiniest woman imaginable, with snow-white, silky hair, mild blue eyes, and pink cheeks. "Isn't she the sweetest thing in the way of mothers?" asked Father Cassidy. "I keep her to look at. Of course," Father Cassidy dropped his voice to a pig's whisper, "there's something odd about her. I've known that woman to stop right in the middle of house-cleaning and go off and spend an afternoon in the woods. Like yourself, I'm thinking she has some truck with fairies." Mrs. Cassidy smiled, kissed Emily, said she must go out and finish her preserving, and trotted off. "Now you sit right down here, Elf, and be human for 10 minutes, and we'll have a friendly snack." Emily was hungry. A nice, comfortable feeling she hadn't experienced for a fortnight. Mrs. Cassidy's plum cake was all her reverend son claimed, and the cream cow seemed to be no myth. "What do you think of me now?" asked Father Cassidy suddenly, finding Emily's eyes fixed on him speculatively. Emily blushed. She had been wondering if she dared ask another favor of Father Cassidy. "I think you are awfully good," she said. "I am awfully good," agreed Father Cassidy. "I'm so good that I'll do whatever you want me to do, for I feel there's something else you want me to do. I'm in a scrape, and I've been in it all summer. You see," Emily was very sober, "I am a poetess." "Holy Mike, that is serious. I don't know if I can do much for you. How long have you been that way?" "Are you making fun of me?" asked Emily, gravely. Father Cassidy swallowed something besides plum cake. "The saints forbid! It's only that I'm rather overcome. To be after entertaining a lady of new moon, and an elf, and a poetess, all in one, is a bit too much for a humble priest like myself. Have another slice of cake and tell me all about it." "It's like this. I'm writing an epic." Father Cassidy suddenly leaned over and gave Emily's wrist a little pinch. "I just wanted to see if you were real," he explained. Yes, you're writing an epic. Go on. I think I've got my second wind now." "I began it last spring. I called it The White Lady first, but now I've changed it to The Child of the Sea. Don't you think that's a better title?" "Much better." "I've got 3 cantos done, and I can't get any further because there's something I don't know and can't find out. I've been so worried about it." "What is it?" "My epic," said Emily, diligently devouring plum cake, "is about a very beautiful, high-born girl who was stolen away from her real parents when she was a baby and brought up in a woodcutter's hut." "One of the 7 original plots in the world," murmured Father Cassidy. "What?" "Nothing. Just a bad habit of thinking aloud. Go on." "She had a lover of high degree, but his family did not want him to marry her because she was only a woodcutter's daughter." "Another of the 7 plots. Excuse me." "So they sent him away to the Holy Land on a crusade, and word came back that he was killed, and then Editha, her name was Editha, went into a convent." Emily paused for a bite of plum cake, and Father Cassidy took up the strain. "And now her lover comes back, very much alive, though covered with pain and scars, and the secret of her birth is discovered through the dying confession of the old nurse and the birthmark on her arm." "How did you know?" gasped Emily in amazement. "Oh, I guessed it. I'm a good guesser. But where's your bother in all this?" "I don't know how to get her out of the convent," confessed Emily. "I thought perhaps you would know how it could be done." Again Father Cassidy fitted his fingers. "Let us see now. It's no light matter you've undertaken, young lady. How stands the case? Editha has taken the veil, not because she has a religious vocation, but because she imagines her heart is broken. The Catholic Church does not release its nuns from their vows because they happen to think they've made a little mistake of that sort. No, we must have a better reason. Is this Editha the sole child of her real parents?" "Yes." "Oh, then the way is clear. If she had had any brothers or sisters, you would have had to kill them off, which is a messy thing to do. Well then, she is the sole daughter and heiress of a noble family, who have for years been at deadly feud with another noble family, the family of the lover. Do you know what a feud is?" "Of course," said Emily disdainfully, "and I've got all that in the poem already." "So much the better. This feud has rent the kingdom in twain, and can only be healed by an alliance between Capulet and Montague." "Those aren't their names."